Liam Carter had everything: dreams, ambition, and a future, until the system betrayed him. Left to die, abandoned by those meant to protect him, he uncovered a truth so dark, it shattered everything. One man, against a billion-dollar empire. Exposing the corruption could cost him his life, but staying silent was never an option. This isn't just revenge, it's a revolution.
Liam Carter had never known true struggle. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't poor either. His childhood was stable: 2 loving parents, a middle-class home, and a future that seemed bright. His father, Mark Carter, was a disciplined man who worked as an accountant, while his mother, Lisa, ran a small bakery. They believed in hard work and instilled the same values in Liam. Growing up, Liam had dreams of making a difference, of doing something meaningful with his life. In high school, he met his closest friends, Daniel, Eric, and Sophie. They were inseparable, sharing ambitions and planning futures that seemed limitless. By the time Liam graduated from university with a degree in business administration, he was ready to carve his own path. But the world outside academia wasn't as welcoming as he had imagined. Jobs were scarce, opportunities limited. The security he had once known was beginning to crack, but he wasn't worried yet. After all, he had always been taught that perseverance paid off. What he didn't know was that life had a brutal lesson waiting for him. The first few months after graduation were a blur of rejection emails and unpaid internships. Liam managed to secure a low-paying job at a financial firm, but it barely covered his bills. His dreams of a stable future began to shrink under the weight of reality. Daniel, his best friend, had landed a corporate job and was already climbing the ladder. Eric had moved to another city, and Sophie was juggling multiple side gigs to make ends meet. The group that had once been inseparable was slowly being pulled apart by life's demands. Liam tried to stay optimistic. His parents supported him as much as they could, but he was determined to make it on his own. Things weren't perfect, but they weren't unbearable, until the day his world came crashing down. It started as a dull pain in his stomach, something he dismissed as stress. But within days, it became unbearable. He doubled over in agony, sweat pouring down his face. When he finally went to the hospital, the doctors diagnosed him with appendicitis. "Good thing we caught it early," the doctor said. "You'll need surgery immediately." Liam wasn't worried. He had health insurance. The thought of a financial burden didn't even cross his mind. But when the hospital contacted his insurance provider, they refused to cover the costs. "There are discrepancies in your policy," the representative said. "This falls under an exclusion clause." Discrepancies? Exclusion clause? None of it made sense. He had been paying for his insurance without fail. How could they refuse him now? But there was no time to argue, his condition was worsening. His parents had to scrape together every penny they had to get him the surgery. The betrayal burned deep. He had trusted the system. And now, it had left him to rot. The surgery saved his life, but the aftermath was devastating. The hospital bills were staggering, tens of thousands of dollars. His parents were forced to take out loans, and Liam found himself drowning in debt he had no means to pay. When he tried to fight the insurance company, he hit a brick wall. Endless paperwork, legal loopholes, and indifferent customer service representatives who treated him like just another statistic. "This is how they operate," Sophie said bitterly. "They take your money for years, but the moment you need them, they turn their backs on you." Liam was furious. But more than that, he felt powerless. He wasn't just fighting his own battle, he was fighting a system designed to exploit people like him. And he was losing. But Liam Carter was not the kind of man to accept defeat. Liam started researching. The more he dug, the more he uncovered. His insurance company wasn't just failing him, they had failed thousands. Denied claims, fraudulent policies, rigged contracts. At the top of it all was Richard Langston, the billionaire CEO whose empire thrived on suffering. He had built his fortune by ensuring that people like Liam never got what they paid for. Liam's frustration turned to obsession. He couldn't let this go. He wouldn't. Langston had to pay. But how do you take down a man who owns everything? Liam didn't know the answer yet. But he would find it. And when he did, the world would watch as Richard Langston fell. Liam's recovery was slow, but his mind never rested. He spent every waking moment researching Richard Langston, uncovering the deep-rooted corruption that fueled his billion-dollar empire. Every article, lawsuit, and testimonial painted the same picture: Langston had built his wealth by bleeding people dry, manipulating the system to work in his favor. The anger within Liam grew into something darker. He had once believed in justice, in fighting the right way, but the system had already proven that it wasn't designed to help people like him. Langston wasn't just untouchable, he was protected. The government, the courts, even the media, everyone had a price. One night, after yet another rejection from a lawyer who wouldn't take his case, Liam sat in his darkened apartment, staring at Langston's face on his laptop screen. His fingers tightened into fists. Justice wasn't coming. But revenge? That, he could control. Liam started planning. He didn't just want to expose Langston, he wanted to destroy him. Not just financially, but publicly, in a way that would leave a permanent stain on his legacy. He reached out to others who had been victims of Langston's insurance scams. Forums, social media groups, underground whistleblower networks. One by one, he collected their stories, their evidence, their rage. But information alone wasn't enough. If he wanted to bring Langston down, he needed to think bigger. He needed to become something more than just a victim seeking revenge. He needed to be a symbol. Liam knew he couldn't do this alone. He reached out to Sophie, the one person he trusted. She was hesitant at first. "Liam, what exactly are you trying to do?" she asked, watching him warily. "I'm going to destroy Richard Langston," Liam said, his voice cold. "I don't care what it takes." Sophie exhaled sharply. "Liam, this is dangerous." "Good," he said. "So am I." Sophie didn't agree immediately, but she also didn't walk away. And that was all Liam needed. Liam needed more than just raw anger, he needed skill. He reached out to people who could help him, people who had suffered under Langston's greed. Sophie, the strategist, with connections in media and journalism. Eric, a tech expert, who could dig into Langston's digital skeletons. Damien, a former insurance adjuster who knew exactly how the fraud worked. Mia, a corporate whistleblower who had once worked inside Langston's empire. Together, they weren't just angry victims. They were a weapon. Their first target wasn't Langston himself, it was the foundation of his empire. If they wanted to break him, they had to start small, eroding his support from the inside. Liam and his team orchestrated a mass data leak, exposing fraudulent practices within Langston's insurance firm. They released thousands of files, detailing illegal claim rejections, bribery, and the manipulation of medical reports. The media took the bait. News stations ran the stories, social media exploded, and public outrage grew. Langston dismissed it as baseless accusations, but Liam wasn't done. This was just the beginning. Langston's PR team worked overtime, but the damage had been done. His company's stock began to drop, and investors started to panic. Liam and his team planted insiders, bribing disgruntled employees to leak more information. Every scandal, every cover-up, Liam made sure it went public. But Langston wasn't a fool. He knew someone was behind this. And he wasn't going to sit back and wait for his empire to crumble. Liam underestimated just how ruthless Langston could be. Within days, Langston's legal team tracked the source of the leaks, and suddenly, Liam and his group found themselves on the defensive. Mia received threats, Damien's past was exposed, and Sophie was fired from her job due to conflicts of interest. And then, Liam received a warning. A plain white envelope slid under his apartment door. Inside was a single message. "Walk away, or you won't get another chance." Liam stared at the paper, his blood running cold. Langston knew who he was. But it was too late to turn back now. Fear was an unfamiliar emotion for Liam, but for the first time, he realized just how dangerous his mission had become. Langston wasn't just a businessman, he was a man with powerful friends. And yet, Liam refused to back down. "We hit him harder," he told his team. "We make sure he knows we're not afraid." But the truth was, he was afraid. And for good reason. Liam's world was closing in. His apartment was ransacked, Eric's accounts were hacked, and Damien was attacked on his way home. This wasn't just corporate retaliation. Langston had declared war. Sophie looked at Liam with desperation. "Liam, this isn't just about revenge anymore. This is survival." Liam clenched his fists. "Then we survive. And we win." Because now, it wasn't just about taking Langston down. It was about finishing what they started. Liam sat in the dimly lit room, staring at the destruction around him. His apartment had been trashed, his personal information leaked online, and his team was under attack. Langston had resources beyond imagination, and now he was using them to crush Liam. But the fear had passed. Now, all Liam felt was rage. "If we stop now, he wins," Liam said to his team. "If we keep going, we might not make it." Eric adjusted his glasses. "I'd rather go down fighting." Mia nodded. "Me too." Liam clenched his jaw. They had crossed a line. There was no way back now. Liam knew they needed a new strategy. Langston had money, power, and influence, things they couldn't match. But Langston also had enemies. Using his contacts, Liam reached out to disgruntled former employees, whistleblowers, and even a few corrupt politicians who had once worked for Langston but had been cast aside. One name stood out, Henry Calloway, a former executive at Langston's firm who had been forced out after refusing to take part in illegal deals. Henry had the inside knowledge they needed. If they could get him on their side, it would be a game changer. Liam met Henry in a secluded diner, watching as the older man stirred his coffee with a shaky hand. "You want to take down Langston?" Henry asked, glancing around nervously. "That's suicide." "Then why did you agree to meet?" Liam countered. Henry sighed. "Because someone needs to stop him." He slid a flash drive across the table. "This has everything: bribery records, off-the-books transactions, even a list of people he's paid to disappear." Liam's heart pounded. This was it. This was what they needed to end Langston. With Henry's files, Liam's team launched a full-scale attack. Financial records were leaked to the media. Secret offshore accounts were exposed. Emails proving bribes and fraud went viral. The public erupted. Langston's company stock crashed overnight, government agencies launched investigations, and journalists swarmed his mansion demanding answers. For the first time in his life, Richard Langston was afraid. But he wasn't defeated yet. Langston fought back, denying everything and calling Liam a disgruntled fraud. He had lawyers, politicians, and even media moguls backing him up. Then, Liam received an anonymous message. "He knows who you are. He's setting you up." The next day, Liam was arrested for cybercrimes. It was a setup. Langston had turned the system against him. Liam sat in a cold jail cell, his hands shaking. His team had gone into hiding, his name was being dragged through the mud, and Langston was painting himself as the victim. But then, something unexpected happened. The people fought back. Thousands of victims came forward, sharing their stories. Protests erupted. Langston's corruption was too big to bury. And then, someone posted the final piece of evidence. A recording of Langston himself, admitting to fraud and calling his victims nothing more than numbers on a spreadsheet. It went viral within hours. Langston's empire was burning. Langston's company fell into chaos. Stockholders pulled out, government agencies raided his offices, and his own board of directors turned against him. The police released Liam on bail as public pressure mounted. And then, the breaking news hit. Richard Langston charged with fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Liam had won. But the fight wasn't over yet. Langston was arrested, but he was still a billionaire with connections. He could buy his way out unless Liam made sure the world never forgot. Liam managed to get into the courthouse on the day of Langston's trial. As they wheeled the disgraced billionaire into the courtroom, their eyes met. "You think you've won?" Langston sneered. "You have no idea how deep this goes." Liam smiled. "Neither do you. Because this wasn't just about Langston anymore. This was bigger than him. Langston's trial was the biggest in corporate history. He lost everything, his company, his fortune, and his power. But as Liam watched the trial from home, he realized something unsettling. Langston was right. This corruption ran deeper than one man. And if Liam stopped now, the system would just replace Langston with another monster. Liam's name was cleared, but he wasn't the same person anymore. He couldn't go back to a normal life. Instead, he used his new influence to start something bigger. A movement. An organization dedicated to exposing corporate fraud, ensuring that no one else suffered like he did. But in the shadows, powerful men watched him. And they weren't happy. Liam's movement gained traction, but the threats returned: anonymous emails, strangers following him, warnings to stop digging. Then, one night, someone broke into his apartment. But they didn't steal anything. They left a message on his wall instead. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Liam wasn't afraid. He was ready for war. Langston was just a pawn. Liam dug deeper and found that Langston had been working under a much larger network of corporate elites, men who controlled governments, economies, and laws. He had exposed one. Now, they were coming for him. Liam couldn't do this alone. He reached out to powerful people who hated the system just as much as he did: investigative journalists, hackers, rogue politicians. Together, they built a secret network. If the system wanted a fight, Liam would give them one. One night, as Liam walked home, a black SUV pulled up beside him. A man in a suit stepped out. He didn't introduce himself. "You're playing a dangerous game," the man said. "Walk away. This isn't about justice anymore. This is survival." Liam looked him in the eyes. "I know." And he wasn't going to stop. Liam's movement grew too big to ignore. Governments were pressured to crack down on corporate corruption, powerful men were exposed, and billionaires fell one by one. But the real enemy still lurked in the shadows. And Liam knew. This was just the beginning. Liam stood at the edge of a new war. He had taken down one monster, but he had awakened an entire system of corruption. The world saw him as a hero. But the people in power? They saw him as a threat. Liam had started this as revenge. Now, it was a revolution. And he was ready for whatever came next. The end. Or just the beginning.